I said, well, what would happen if you found a human femur in the sandbar at the ocean? And he would be like, well, it's basically lost property until you can figure out who owns the femur. And I was like, what? And he's like, no, that's the deal. It's like, unless you've got a missing black, because that bone could be 5 years old. It could be, 100 years old.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I learned about some of that investigative stuff is they don't put any evidence in clear baggies like they do in Hollywood. They put it in brown bags. They put it in brown paper bags.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I'll be damned. That blew my mind away. And I thought, you know how many books I've read and how many series I've watched where they lifted up the Ziploc looking baggie and they dropped it in there and they just totally sold you off on the fact that that's correct and it's not.
Yeah, but it's like a brown paper bag that may be real, but it also just doesn't have a cinematographic punch.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very
Which is
cool.
a big part of writing, I think, is understanding when to be correct and have the details, honestly in real time correct, or have a story that is people can engulf themselves in. And I think sometimes, that can get you in trouble as a writer. That'd probably be my advice to people is like, you have to pick your battles. So how important is it to get this exact thing correct? And I think somebody at BoucherCon said it last year, and they said it really, really well. I can't remember what panel it was on, but they said the exact same thing. Like, is it important to call it a Glock 21 right now, or a Glock 20 or a 19 or a 17, or is it important right now to just call it a pistol? Like, how important is that detail?
Yeah. No, I think that's an incredibly important point, because now there are some authors like Jack Carr who he makes choices about the things that interact with the character and the character's world, because from his perspective, it tells you something about the character that they make the choices that they make for whatever reason. But and that's good, and that works for Jack Carr. But I think a lot of times it's just a semi-automatic pistol.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes that's all it needs to be, and we tend to overthink it. And that's where we get in trouble, because we're like, I got to make sure that they understand that this is a Glock and it's got 17 rounds as opposed to 15. And it just makes you go, how important was it to break that down right then and there?
Exactly. I was a little shameless advertising for our mutual friend, Chris Growell, the trigger guard. We were in Chris is a retired Special Forces NCO, and we were talking about weapons and something about like my favorite weapon came up, right? And he made the comment, goes, my favorite weapon is the one that happens to be in my hand and is loaded when I need it.
That's
and
good.
It's like, enough said.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah.
Just but the point is, I mean, like, for some people that's important, but I think for a lot of people it's a damn pistol.
Yeah.
That's all it is. So.
Yeah. And I think the writer who said that was not a guy with a military background or anything like that. And at first when he said it, I was like, well, that's kind of stupid. You really ought to get a little more specific about it. And, it's kind of important detail. And then I thought, you know what? It's not. And who better to explain that than someone who isn't a huge gun guy, who has no military background or any kind of, clandestine background, like working for the agency or the FBI or law enforcement or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the fact that the threat is the gun. The threat is the pistol. Don't get so enamored with the details that it takes away from the story because you're enamored with the details. Like what Jack Carr does. Some of those things that are in his books define who James Reese is. It really gives you an idea of who he is as a person, as a character. But in another other books, it focuses more on the action. So it's not really, what does it matter if it's a Glock or a SIG in the moment? Now, maybe if you're in another country, it matters. So then you got to know what you're talking about. And maybe if they pick up a weapon, they pick up a Russian version or something that's different, that's not familiar to them. And you can play with that a little bit. But I think going too far with the details can kind of distract from the story. Like it don't slow down the action.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. So, well, brother, it's been an hour and I've had a great time. Look forward to doing this again soon.
Next month.
I was boning up on current events and like what's the latest craziness to happen overseas, and apparently the Ministry of Defense in Poland is preparing for the worst, and I'm like, well, we didn't get to that. So.
It's kind of depressing too.
It is. The reality is, if the Russians do take Ukraine, Poland is next. And the problem with Poland is Poland's an actual U.S. It's not U.S. It is a NATO member state, so that's
not
a whole different bag of
Yeah, sure is. Yeah, well, we're going to do this again. You're going to come back next month. We're going to interview MP Woodward, so people should definitely make sure you like and subscribe. Follow Dell on Twitter and Instagram. He's on there. You can find him, and because we're going to come back next month. And again, Tom Clancy's next book, authored by MP Woodward. We're going to sit down with him mid-May, so be looking forward to that, and Dell will be back. Dell, thanks again, brother. It's always good to see you. We stay in touch weekly, so we'll do this again here in another month.
All righty, brother. You be well now.
You too.